Welcome to the Business of School podcast, brought to you by Cole Connect. Get ready for a journey of topical insights, engaging conversations, and maybe a few aha moments from the business, finance, and technology side of schools. Cole School experts are your host, and with our guests from the world of education, we're about to embark on a learning adventure to support you in the business of your school. Anne-Maree Ironside is a CPA and graduate of the Australian Institute of Company Directors, with experience in finance leadership across education and various other commercial sectors. She has a strong track record in managing cross-functional teams from finance, HR, marketing, IT and facilities management. Her current role is the business manager at the Pittwater House Schools on Sydney's Northern Beaches. Well, on the podcast today, we've got two guests. We've got Anne-Maree from Pittwater House School over in New South Wales, and we have Teresa, who's part of the Cole team and one of our payroll specialists. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Today, we're going to talk about the wonders of outsourcing payroll. There is obviously a reason why we've got you, Anne-Maree, to talk about that as a payroll client. But we'll talk about intricacies of how that works in a moment. But maybe first of all, you could highlight to us what some of the common payroll challenges are that schools are facing at the moment, and what you're experiencing with your team.
Well, I think one of the reasons that we went with Cole was that was the consistency over having that payroll job covered. So we may have somebody in that role. If they were to go on sick leave, then we need to make sure that someone else in the team is across actually doing the payroll. If you have changes in personnel, then that's another complication.
So continuity is a big challenge.
A massive challenge. And I think too, the other part for schools is the complexities of our MEA. From a teaching perspective, it's fairly easy to interpret, but certainly on the payer side, which is the professional and operating support staff, that can be quite complicated. And we found that working with Cole, you guys are experts in that area, and you also collaborate within your group if there's an issue. So when I was working with Teresa, I'd ask her a question and she said, well, I'll check with somebody else who's got some other schools in New South Wales and help you with that.
Yeah, because let's be honest, like school payroll is not easy. Like the number of people we talk to that do payroll in other sectors, and they will talk about how difficult and the challenges they have. It seems that with school payroll, it's next level.
Exactly. You've got, although they're schools, they're the same industry, they have different awards, well, not different awards, they have different MEAs and rules that they go by with processing their payroll. So it's so different and diverse across all states, even within the state.
Yeah. And even within the same school, you have all the variations in the different roles. We have different people wear different hats at different times during the week as well, and that has implications in the EA. So 100%. It is definitely a challenge for every school to have to face, is to get that payroll done each fortnight, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
So Anne-Maree, how has outsourcing helped you address these challenges?
Well, I think for us, we never have to be concerned now when someone is on leave. So we have that consistency within your team that if somebody is, obviously you plan ahead. We'll find out someone's off for a month. Someone will step into that role before they go on leave and get an understanding of it. And there's always someone in your team who can oversee that position whilst that person's on leave. So consistency-wise, don't need to worry about it. It's fantastic. And also, once again, I think it's that expertise. We use TAS as an example for processing the payroll. You've got a number of people in your team who use TAS. So if there's if there's a problem there, you guys will be all over it.
Yeah, and we're strategic partners with many of the payroll providers, and it really helps having that expertise to be able to understand the software when we walk into the job. So yeah, that's a real good point. But for effective payroll outsourcing, it's a two-way process, isn't it, Teresa? What do you find from working with clients like Anne-Maree is so important to make that collaboration work really well?
Oh, it's just the work that you provide us, like the information you provide, it's on time. There's no delays. There's no miscommunication. Your HR manager, she provides me with all the information that I need prior to payroll. So then that makes my life a lot easier with processing, getting payroll done on time and everyone paid correctly. And that's a huge advantage, a benefit for me as a payroll officer.
It's definitely teamwork, isn't it?
Definitely teamwork.
The other thing is Teresa wouldn't let you can't get anything past her.
The gatekeeper.
I try.
Well, it's very important, and it's a good point that because to let it work well, not only do you need that good communication, but an acceptance of both parties to understand what the framework is and the timeline and the cutoffs
Yes.
and the information that's needed when. And we see that working with many schools doing payroll each fortnight is that the schools that really work closely with us together is the payrolls that are the most effective.
Yes. And they trust you as well. They trust Cole in their decision making, and their advice that we provide them is beneficial too. And we work together. We just worked well with Pittwater. I worked well with Pittwater. Cole worked well with Pittwater. We were a good team together.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
we mentioned earlier the uniqueness and complexity of school payrolls. Anne-Maree, how has Cole supported your school with education-specific award compliance and the interpretation?
Well, I think in New South Wales, in the independent sector, we had a new CMEA come into effect this year, but it was delayed, so it didn't really get passed until April. But we had to do all the back pays to the first payroll in February. So the complexity of that was quite intense because we had to work out firstly what level everybody should be on, and then work out how we do these back pays. I think, what do you think, Teresa? That was probably one of the most complicated things that we've done in the time that I've been
worked
in
with
here.
you. Yes, it was a huge task, but it was so smooth. We broke it up in sections. You did your bit, I did my bit, and
Yeah.
I think everyone was happy in the end. We didn't really
Well,
have.
as I was saying before, like I had a spreadsheet because I love a spreadsheet. So I had a spreadsheet of everybody's current level and then what I think the level they should be going on. So that was in a shared file that Teresa and I had access to over that whole time. And Teresa was really thorough in double checking if we'd made a mistake on anybody or allocated somebody incorrectly. So it was just really nice as well to have somebody doing that set. I mean, we checked it obviously on our end. HR, myself, and our deputy principal went through that. But then Teresa also did that second line of defence just to check that we had all of that correct.
And we definitely remember it. Teresa
Yep.
will, because there was a very hectic time because it wasn't just your school that having the
We had
EA
multiple
implementation. We had
schools.
multiple. And I think that's another benefit of getting us involved in that process, because the experience we had of dealing with that with many schools is that we could collectively add that experience to each of the clients that were going through the same thing. And obviously that's not something you're going to be able to obtain if you have an internal payroll officer that's having to deal with the challenge of that implementation on their own. We had quite a few go in, and it was hectic time, busy, but having done so many was quite useful actually, wasn't it?
I had two at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot.
So Anne-Maree, do you think having industry-specific payroll experts makes a difference, or could any outside provider offer the same outsourced benefits?
Look, obviously Cole is industry specific and it's been excellent, and I would be unlikely to maybe consider going to any payroll provider. But payroll people are a special breed, and I think sometimes you are very thorough, and I think that whilst I probably wouldn't go to an external provider, there is probably somebody out there who would be able to interpret what we do pretty quickly and understand it. But it would just probably be an extra step for them to do that. Because the other thing is, I think that's specific to our sector, is that we have averaged employees, which I don't think outside of education that's a thing, where we pay people over the whole year but they only work during term time. That's hard to get your head around when you're trying to explain that to somebody. So I think, I'm sure another provider could do it, but I'm fairly sold on having somebody who is education specific.
Yeah, and it's like some of those things we've already mentioned, like you've got a school-specific software that the team needs to know. You've got EA implementations that you need to understand and get across and be familiar with because you've seen it elsewhere, and just some of those intricacies of what in the payroll processing of dealing with your spread paid employees, your sports coaches that in the day are a science teacher, and all those things like that.
Yeah.
Like just being able to get across that and be familiar with it in the the volume as well of processing that needs to happen each fortnight makes it as effective as possible, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what do you find from your experience, Anne-Maree, would be something that a school should consider before outsourcing its payroll? Like what should
Look,
they look for in a provider?
I've worked at another school where the payroll person was absolutely brilliant and had been there for a very long time and was fantastic. I wouldn't have probably considered outsourcing in that space because that person had more experience than anybody I know. But in our situation, we'd had some some changes in personnel. So we'd had changes in business managers, we'd had changes in payroll people. So we didn't have continuity of understanding perhaps the back history of somebody who'd been at the school. Because I think that's the other part of schools is you'll have someone that they used to be in this team and then they've moved to that team and their long service leave changed here, then they went to a different, there's so many different arrangements. And for us, we were starting to lose that continuity of understanding in that space. So I think for us, that was the reason for doing it. Like I said, in some schools it'll be no need for it.
Well, if you've got the
But
right
for us,
person, it's gold, isn't it? And we all see that. Unfortunately, it seems in the sector that the hardest role to employ for at the moment is the payroll team in schools.
yeah, sure.
Just maybe because of not only is the shortage of people available, but also just trying to find that blend of skill set that we mentioned before about knowing the software, having this payroll expertise, understanding and having experience with school payrolls. That's very difficult to find, isn't it? And I like
think
what you
too,
said earlier about how when you've spoken and worked with Teresa, that you knew behind Teresa there was a whole team of payroll
of
specialists
course,
that was a backup. You
absolutely.
can't employ that pool of expertise. That's something you
No,
just
and
tap
look,
into.
for some schools they'll have a payroll person, but they'll have somebody as a backup who's always been their backup. And like I said, at my previous school, there was a couple of people who'd done payroll and were perfectly fine. But here, we didn't have that second line of defence. We didn't have that backup for somebody else to do the payroll and manage that whole process. So I think for us, it was ideal. And honestly, I think the business manager before me thought that this might have been just a stopgap. But I think I've said it to you before, as long as my bum is in this seat, we are using coal. I'm never not outsourcing payroll to you guys because it just is the one thing I never have to worry about.
That's lovely to hear, and that's exactly the objective we want. Fine, so that's brilliant. One of the things we get asked about a lot by clients is data security. Anne-Maree, how confident are you about how sensitive, obviously payroll data being so sensitive, how confident you are in its security, especially working with a team that's an outside contractor and is working remotely? What's your experience with that?
Well, I mean, you can only be confident up to a certain point when it comes to cybersecurity, really. But I mean, if I isolate it and say, am I confident with Cole and your confidentiality? Absolutely, I am. That's your core business, and I understand that you'll always be confidential. When it comes to data security, as a school, we have everything possibly in place to ensure that our data is secure. But something could go wrong, but I think that's the same for any business at the moment. There's no 100% guarantee. I mean, we have, I don't want to disclose how we do this, but, we obviously have a shared space that we work in that we feel confident is secure. And obviously you have access to that. And I think Teresa will attest to this. Recently, we needed to add somebody else in there. And our IT department wouldn't give them permission until we had a number of steps in place and covered off on that. But, in the main, I'm as confident as I possibly can be with that security of our data.
How much of a benefit to you, Anne-Maree, is it that Teresa and the team are working, though virtually, they're working within your environment, on your data set, within your software and in your folder structure, rather than taking the data outside and working it in our own software? How much of a benefit is that to you guys?
It's really important because I think one of the pieces of outsourcing payroll is some part of payroll will always remain in your business. So we choose to have all of our staff come to us with payroll questions. And I don't know how easy we would be able to respond to that if we didn't have access to that information on our system. So I think from our perspective, I feel more comfortable in you operating in our world in that respect. But I would understand if you first wanted to outsource, you might not do that. But we also have some control over it if it's within our system, and I think that's what we would prefer.
We try to do it so that it's as if the whole person is working in the office next door.
That's what we like.
And how easy is that for you as a payroll officer working in the environment of the school?
Easy is just like I'm working in an office at the school. I don't really have any issues with the SharePoint or or the programs, any of it.
That's good. And what it means is that the security policy for our team is the same as if they were employed by you. So that's a lot easier for you and your IT and your risk teams to manage, isn't it, on regards to the access and the data. Next question then, Anne-Maree. Has Cole supported you beyond just processing the fortnightly pay in this relationship?
Yeah, well, I know, Teresa, you did the WGEA submission for us. Teresa did a lot of the work on that. When we have audit each year, the payroll team prepare a lot of the reports that we need. Whilst we sit between the auditors and Cole, they provide all of the information that we need and reports and analysis that the auditors need. And there's often other ad hoc things that Teresa has done for us. As an example, in schools, a lot of schools have this. You've had somebody who's been an employee for 25 years, and then when they retire or resign, you realise that you probably need to go back and do a full audit of their long service leave history to work out, because you might have been using TAS for the last 4 years, and then another system before that, another system before that.
We do those reconciliations
Yes,
a lot,
do.
don't we? Yeah, that's right. It's a good example.
So we've had Cole help us just double check that what we've calculated is correctly, because it's a lot of money that you're paying out at the end for some of these people. Can you think of anything else, Teresa? I think there are probably some, there's lots of ad hoc stuff.
There is a lot. It's just random stuff that come up. Even just like, you're talking about long service leave. People are asking about, annual leave accruals, how many I've got left, or they query and they believe they've got more sick leave than they don't.
Yes.
Those little random odd questions that always come up with every sort of payroll. And what else is there? Even the averages or an explanation. I think Kate might have asked, can you help me explain, or might have been Jenny, your staff there have asked me to put a little blurb together to explain the averaging and how that is calculated and how they get paid their annual salary that they're entitled to. That sort of stuff, yeah.
That's good. The good thing is, Anne-Maree, that you, the finance team and the HR team, know that you've always got a team that you can bounce things off. Like whatever queries or questions or challenges come up, we're just a phone call or a Teams call away, aren't we? So that's good.
Definitely.
Now, one of the things that always gets associated with outsourcing is cost. People will say to us, well, it's going to cost me a fortune, isn't it, to outsource this or that? What's your experience, Anne-Maree? How cost effective do you find outsourcing the payroll?
Well, the cost works out to be very similar to having a payroll person in your team. And that might seem like that's expensive, but it's not really expensive because you're paying a premium for expertise, which is, I think, what we're getting. And I think probably the point that I make there is that some payroll work still remains in your team that might have gone to the payroll person. However, we don't have any of the errors, dramas, all those sorts of things anymore because we have, we've outsourced it to people who know what they're doing. So the cost really is the same as having a payroll person. And you may have had a payroll person who worked, 5 days a week, but on the other hand, we have access to you 5 days a week. So if we have questions or we need to know something, it happens, but also too, you're doing work behind the scenes that I'm not even aware of.
That's where the magic happens, eh?
Because I know that we update information to our shared drive every few days, and that's being actioned, and I'm not even worrying about it because I know that it's come payroll day, it's all been done.
That's awesome. And that goes back to what Teresa was saying earlier about the trust between the two parties.
Yep.
That's awesome. Now, if a school was considering outsourcing, Anne-Maree, do you have any tips for them for planning the transition to an outsourced provider?
Well, I think internally from the school's perspective, you need to have a good relationship with your HR team, because the journey on payroll starts with HR. So if you don't have a good relationship with them,
we say amen to that, don't we?
Yes, 100%.
I work really closely, and so does our finance team work closely with HR, so that we're all on all of those emails, so we know what's happening. Sometimes HR doesn't need to be on it, but at least they're across anything that's going on, so that if it does come up later on, we all know, oh, that was the payroll where we didn't do that, we forgot to do the meal allowance, we've done that, those sorts of things. And I think in our case, that's been really good, is that payroll knows where to upload any new contracts, any terminations, any of that information, and all of us are across it. So I think that's the first point. And then obviously I think, because I wasn't actually involved with our implementation, but I would think that we would have to have a kick-off meeting with Cole, just to determine, your time frame for things. When do you want that information? How do we share that information with you? I think, how do you check? How are you going to check off that information?
Well, you've spoken a fair bit about why you choose to outsource, Anne-Maree. My last question is, would you ever return to in-house payroll?
Never.
She didn't have to think about that, did she?
Never.
That's the right answer.
Unless, I'll tell you, if we would do it, when Teresa moves to the Northern Beaches.
And you employ her.
When do I pack my bags? No, I'm only joking.
Well, it's been lovely chatting with you, Anne-Maree. It really has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being very open and honest about the work that we've been doing with you and your experience of payroll outsourcing. We know you're being completely honest and genuine about what you say, and especially in the compliments you say about Teresa and the team. They are wonderful people. They do an awesome job.
You're great.
We have to cut this short now because we've got to go and finish your payroll off. All right.
No, it was done before.
Oh, we did it before. Meeting. See, that's how efficient she is. That's great.
Our payroll went through at 11 o'clock, so we're all good.
Yeah. Superb. All right. Well, brilliant. Well, we'll chat again, and thanks very much. And that's a wrap for this episode of the Business of School podcast. We've enjoyed the conversation today and would love to have you join us for future episodes. Please hit the subscribe button and follow the links below to find more information and resources to support you and your school team. Until next time, keep being innovative, keep being awesome, and remember, there is always opportunity to improve on the journey. Thanks for connecting.